Welcome to Alpha Wolf's Den. It's here that we seek enlightenment. Alpha Wolf Trading recognizes that the most successful companies in the world at one point had no earnings. There's a lot more to a company than just its earnings report. That's why here at Alpha Wolf's Den, we interview executive teams. We want to get to know management. We want to understand the vision, the mission, the strategic drivers, the plan. We want to separate fact from fluff. This is not a paid for promotion interview. This is solely wanting to know the company's vision, mission, their critical success factors, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and the threats. We want to know the long-term objective and the tactical initiatives that leadership plans to implement to achieve success. We want to know about the company's debt, the cap structure, what it's going to take for them to become self-sustaining and stop burning through cash. We want to know management's previous failures, challenges, hurdles, how they overcame them, or what they learned that they can apply in their current role. We're trying to identify the risk and the reward. And oftentimes, it's strong leadership that makes the difference between success and failure. Here at Alpha Wolf Trading, we are looking for the hidden gems. And I hope you enjoy this interview because this is one of those companies that I think could be a hidden gem. Please understand that this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is not financial advice, and I am not a financial advisor. Any investment that you decide to make in any security should be based upon your own due diligence. Welcome to Alpha Wolf Trading's CEO interview with Reklaim, ticker symbol MYID as in dog, F as in Frank, MYID Frank, with CEO Neil Sweeney. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with another CEO interview and another exciting story. This one is kind of on the cutting edge, and I think you're going to find this pretty fascinating in general. But Neil from Reklaim, which was formerly Killy, but has now become Reklaim, which I happen to love this name because I think it encompasses what their mission, what their vision is very well. Neil, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always, whenever I see the Alpha Wolf Trading, I always think like we should do some like big howl at the beginning of our interview, just get like pumped up for it. But like Alpha Wolf Trading, let's go. I'm ready.
What's funny about that is when you get the recording, when you get the edited recording of this, watch the very first minute of the opening because there will be a howl.
You should make all the CEOs do an Alpha Wolf howl as a rite of passage. It's like, look, if you want to do an interview with me, like you've got to give me your best Alpha Wolf howl. Otherwise, like I'm just moving on.
I love it. I love it.
I like the name though, Tim. I like I like that you like the new name. We'd be off to a rocky start if you said right off the bat that the new name Reklaim didn't jive with you. But
no. I think it was very. I think it was perfect. I think it was the perfect name. I didn't get Killy, right? That one I didn't get, but this one I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, right? So give us a little background on you, Neil, and then we'll get back into what exactly Reklaim does.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a little brief background on myself. I'm the CEO and founder of Reklaim. I've been doing this now for quite some time. Reklaim was actually a business that was incubated inside of my last company, a company called Freckle. Ironically, that was the company that we took public. We sold that company. We kept the public shell in Reklaim, and we've been growing Reklaim into that original shell. On top of that, Freckle was built inside of my last company, a company called Juice. So there's a bit of a Ukrainian doll type situation here where I like building companies. I like building technology. I think my sweet spot is really kind of seeing where things are going, commercializing and building that nascent technology. And then, just like any other ecosystem, you have to have people that have the courage to be out on the edge and are good at building out on the edge. I think that suits my personality. And, as time goes on, those bigger fish and those bigger companies, more often than not, want to buy that innovation because that's not really what they're good at. So Reklaim was created officially, a couple of years ago. There's been a lot of great progress on it. Most recently, obviously, the rebrand to Reklaim, which we think is important specifically for kind of the product and how it resonates with individual consumers. But yeah, originally from Toronto, my accent's probably going to give me away, but spend my time split between Toronto and New York. So hopefully that helps the viewers.
Okay. All right. So Reklaim, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the vision here is there are a lot of companies that have collected a lot of data on a lot of people over a long period of years and made a lot of money off of it, right?
Yeah.
Some could say that invasion of privacy, possibly, and I think it's becoming more and more of an issue, right, with the tracking and the cookies and all of that stuff. And your platform or product is not only providing the opportunity to get paid for your data, but more importantly, to see on one platform who has access to your data, and then to be able to change whatever settings you want to change in one platform to take your data back. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but just kind of going back to the beginning, the mission of Reklaim is simple. Our aspiration is to provide every single adult in the world today with access to what we believe is rightfully theirs, and that's their data. I've yet to meet anybody that thinks that that's a bad idea, because while your viewers will be investors, they're consumers first. And as a consumer, they have a data profile. That profile is always on, always being amalgamated, always being consumed, and always powering another organization. And the reality is that the only person that doesn't have access to that data is you, which is crazy. So, we're in an environment where there's over 7 billion people on the planet. Every single person's got a data profile, but yet nobody has access to it. That's crazy. And then you put in the fact that, that data, once amalgamated and used by these various platforms, is worth approximately $6,000 per year, growing at a rate of 30% per annum. It starts to kind of fall apart. So, like what we believe is that, similar to a Kredit Carma, where you want to look at your credit score, you go to Kredit Carma and look it up. There is no such destination for consumer data. There's nowhere for you to see actually who has your data. So the idea here with Reklaim is, let's create a consumer destination for people around the planet to actually come in, put in an email address or a phone number. When we do that, we actually do a query against 30,000 different sources of data. This is security firms, publishers, data companies, etc. And the end result of that is, for the first time in your life, we're going to present you with the data that's currently, being used and amalgamated around the internet. You can then take that data and put it underneath the profile. Now, the one thing that I think is really important about Reklaim is that when we started this business, and I think this is an important thing for people to understand, what you start with in a business and what you finish with are never the same thing. It's a winding road to product market fit. We had this very narrow belief that your data equals money, therefore you should get paid. And we thought that that was the gap in the market. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, that is a gap, but it's in what we believe is it's not the biggest gap. We believe the biggest gap is access, because you need access in order to actually drive compensation. Without access, how do you drive compensation? Well, the short answer is you can't. And then there also needs to be an acknowledgement that there's a large percentage of the population that doesn't want to sell their data. Some people want to protect their data. And so I think for us, what we were not interested in was building a product that was only for people that wanted to actually sell their data. What we believe is that we want to provide people with access to their data so that we can provide optionality around that data. If that option is for you to choose to sell your data, great. If it's for you to choose to protect your data, great. If it's for you to use it as a way to, log into a crypto account or to actually sign into a platform, that's another option. So for us, we think that that's a way bigger boat. The idea that by kind of pinning consumer data back with with its rightful owner, really the opportunities around like what you can do with that data, or the options you can create for consumers is really, really endless. So that's a little bit of a framework as to how we built this out.
Okay. And that initially, that wasn't the way that it was initially thought out. I mean, you really did think that the motivator for people would have been, and I thought it too. I thought it as well, that they would want to get paid for their data. But like you said, a lot of people, that isn't really that important to them. It's more about, for some, it's protecting. I guess for others, they don't even care. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's interesting when we went through. So, just kind of quickly coming back to the brand perspective, people ask me about Reklaim. Well, this is about reclaiming your identity, taking you back from them. So I want to go out into the market and take back and reclaim what's rightfully mine. So like that's the philosophy around it. When we did all the user testing around building this brand, what became very clear was that there were sort of these three core personas. There's what's referred to as a scavenger. That's that person that doesn't really care about privacy at all, is really focused on, hey, I want to make money and I'll give whatever I need to give in order to make money. The extreme on the other side is the idealist. Now, this is the person that has no interest in compensation, but is very fixated on privacy. And then between these two extremes is this pragmatist. This is somebody who says, yeah, I'm interested in the compensation, but I'm also interested in privacy. So I kind of want a bit of both. And it's across those three personas that you're really capturing the entire audience, because by and large, you're going to fit into one of those three buckets. And so if you just use that, kind of triangle as an example, access creates optionality for three different personas. You can sort of draw that triangle. If you just think about the compensation side, you can kind of visualize how you're just very linearly kind of driven into one fraction of a much larger market. Look, at the end of the day, we want to build the biggest company, with the biggest product for the most amount of people. And I don't think you can do that just on compensation. And what I say to people all the time is, when you're building a company or you're building a product, there's always a path to what's referred to as product market fit. And people will debate kind of what those tenets are, but to me, the number one thing is, what's the opportunity? What's the size of the opportunity?
The total addressable market.
That's
right?
it. So what is it? I'm like, well, you have a $1 trillion a year data market. You have 7 billion people on the planet. Every one of these 7 billion people can be a client of Reklaim's. And the $1 trillion in data that's actually being transacted today can all be a client of Reklaim. Why? Because changes to privacy regulation, so on and so forth. So it's like, well, that's a pretty big market, right? So if you're able to carve out, a share of that market in the fractions of percentages, this is $1 billion business. And not to splash the pot and kind of jump all over the place, but I mean, look, you follow the market intimately. People talk about metaverse and Web3 all the time. What I say to people all the time is like, take a look at what's happened. What is Web3? Well, Web 1 was a sort of a standalone, read-only browser. Web 2 was the equivalent of a social network. Web 3 is sort of this decentralized, environment where people control their identity. And doesn't that sound eerily familiar to what we're doing here at Reklaim? And like when you take the scale and the distribution of the audience that we have, for me, what we're quietly building here is massive scale. We're building massive architecture here for what I believe is going to power Web3. So, that's going to take time for us to get there. You can't just kind of roll out of bed and be like, we're in Web3. I mean, you've got to build a business that, is iterating towards that. So we have a business that satisfies the market today, but it's not myopic in that it's not growing towards where the market is going. And like, we think, hey, when you give control and data back to the individual consumer, you're getting towards that, that future state of where the market is going. So, I think Reklaim is really well positioned to not only satisfy the market today, but to, satisfy kind of the bigger trends that are happening for the future as well.
So let's talk about some of the changes in the way that data is collected or has been collected in the past and how that's changing moving forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, for a disclaimer, I'm very biased on this. So, disclaimer. But what I find very strange is that, forget about Reklaim for a second. If you read the Journal or the Financial Times or CNBC, and you played kind of privacy bingo, every second story is rooted in privacy or data, like pretty much. China, Microsoft, metaverse, COVID screening, like this stuff all has this underlying drumbeat of privacy and data. But yet somehow or another, the market hasn't figured it out. Like to me, I actually think that this is one of the biggest macro trades going. It's bigger than the migration of combustion engine to electric vehicle. It's bigger than the retail movement away from bricks and mortar to internet. You are moving every single data company, every single company that ingests data is going to have to find a new source of data basically in the next 12 months because of some of the changes that are happening. The obvious one is, yes, of course, governments are making changes to privacy policy. And I think that there's sort of two steps to this. We saw this start in Europe with GDPR. And really, this is based on the idea that the government understands what these bigger technology companies are doing with data. And they don't like it because the individual consumers are the people that vote for them. So there's sort of the job of the government to take care of their constituents. So they've changed privacy policy to basically force anybody that's using data to get explicit consent. Now, again, that seems intuitive, but the problem is that the entire data market is built not on consent. It's built on this sort of latent consent, which has been great for the data market historically. It's turned into this massive data market, but it's really come at the expense of the individual consumer. And so what privacy regulators are trying to do is put that genie back in the bottle. And you're starting to see this in the US with, in California, with the Privacy Act in California. Virginia implemented similar things. We saw that in 21. In 22, you're going to see the same trend. So expect, 3 or 4 more states to change privacy law to garner explicit consent. And that puts increasingly more pressure on companies that are actually buying data. Now, with that, I think we're capitalists. So I don't think either of us believe that the government is going to change this market. We know that business is going to change this market. And if you take the baton and you pass it from government to technology, what's Apple doing? Every single one of your viewers will automatically assume and acknowledge that Apple is aligning themselves with privacy. Why? Well, because it's a way for them to differentiate themselves from people like Google, Facebook, and others who are under the lights of antitrust. Apple's a hardware company. It doesn't rely on advertising, and what they're basically saying to consumers in a not so subtle way is, we're not going to leak data from any Apple device in the future. And what I always kind of point to is, if you have an Apple device, you'll be familiar with the modal window that you see when you've opened up an application. It says, do you allow weather.com to track you on other applications? You, like everybody else, says no. And when you take that, this to me sums up the biggest problem in the market. you have a $1 trillion market that depends on people saying yes to that modal window. But yet, when presented with that modal window, 90% of consumers say no, which means you are going to have a massive collapse in supply in the market. You're going to have a massive change in the people that are actually getting that data. And so what we've seen with Apple is they've eliminated, date like the mobile ID, location tracking. They're taking stuff out of the email now too. So, Apple's becoming kind of this privacy safe haven. And that in itself is having a dramatic impact on the market. And you'll see this, Facebook will put out earnings, or Poshmark will put out earnings, and they'll say, our Q4 number was impacted by privacy changes in Apple. You'll hear that statement over and over and over again. Get used to it, because there's a bigger shoe to drop that nobody's paying attention to. And that's the move that Google's making. And so Google is doing a similar tactic to Apple in that they too are using privacy as a way to kind of make their business stronger. What I say to everybody is Google is becoming a walled garden similar to Facebook. And as a byproduct of that, what it's doing is it's eliminating any leaking of data off of that Google island. Now, the problem with that is Google is so dominant that they have the market, they're the market leader in what's referred to as a cookie. Now, the cookie is what powers all of the revenue for all these advertisers and brands. And if you want to get a sense of how things are going to change, there's over 2 billion websites in the world today that all have a dependency on the cookie. Google's got 65 to 70% market share. They're going to shut that down, which means 50% of the open web by the end of the year is going dark.
That's what I wanted to really highlight. So
yeah,
repeat that again. They're shutting down the cookie.
Yeah. So this is always the kind of like the lean in moment. Whenever I tell people this, they're like, whoa, wait a minute, what? I'm like, yes. So I'm like, look, the Chrome browser has 65 to 70% of the browser market, because that's what people use to toggle the web. When you put in a search for a barbecue, or you go to a cooking website, they drop the equivalent of a pixel on those sites. And then those sites actually use that pixel to then sell advertising against that persona. Now, what Google's saying is we're getting rid of the cookie because it's privacy invasive. That's not true. Google's getting rid of the cookie because what they're doing is they're shutting off the oxygen in the room to force anybody that's not currently on Google Island to come aboard. And that means every publisher that's currently not working with Google will have to come to Google, and any advertiser that's not currently working with Google will have to come to Google. So they're kind of, they're eating their young here a little bit, and that they're willing to take one step backwards to kind of take 2 steps forwards. But again, the challenge with this is that if you fast forward to the end of the year, smaller websites that don't have the technical acumen, don't have the scale, don't have the revenue, like they're just dead in the water. They're going to go dark. And then we're going to be left with nothing but walled gardens, which is Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc. And that's going to be it. So like the open internet, as we know, is sort of under pressure unless somebody creates an alternative. And we believe that that's kind of us. And, the last thing I'll sort of say on this is that, when you think about a company like Facebook or Amazon or Twitter, the value of these companies is based on what's referred to as their social graph, which is just fancy language for like the data that they have on all their consumers. It's not the like button or the scroll feature that is actually the IP. It's the data. But when you and Facebook doesn't leak that data outside of its walled gardens. Now, if you think about the future, when you start to disintermediate that data from a Facebook, a Twitter, and a Google, those individual platforms start to actually lose credibility and or steam. What we're building at Reklaim is a disintermediated social graph powered by the consumer to juxtapose against the social graph that is sitting in these individual walled gardens. We have 320 million profiles. 87% of the North American population can come into Reklaim today and actually find data on themselves. So when you think about the present state and the future state, in my bones, I know that the future is consumer control of data. That's happening. I don't believe you're going to be able to build a Facebook in the future in the same way. And if you take that parallel and say, okay, so what does that look like, Neil? It doesn't look like Neil giving his data to Facebook for Facebook to own, because they say they own it, to then sell with no reciprocity for Neil. It will mean Facebook's got to come to Neil and query the data directly from Neil based on kind of rules and regulations that Neil puts in place. And if he decides to actually shut down his Facebook account, the data's cut too. So, this is the Lego that we've been building, but, today we sell to these brands, platforms, and companies who are worried about the cookie. We don't have one cookie in our ecosystem. So if you want to offset your exposure to the cookie, come to Reklaim. If you want to offset your exposure to the mobile identifier that is being blacked out in Apple, come to Reklaim because we don't have that exposure. And then if you're worried about using data that does not have explicit consent from the consumer, come to Reklaim because we have one-by-one consent. So, I think that there's so many of these tailwinds kind of pushing this market. The good thing for us is like most of the big data companies are huge enterprise level data companies. So it's very difficult for them to transition to the future of where the market's going. So that's where we think the big opportunity is.
I mean, to me, it's a fascinating look at what's coming, right? I mean, a lot of businesses are going to be impacted. I get concerned about a lot of things, like the metaverse. Okay, Meta, Facebook is no longer Facebook. We have to call it Meta now, man. Meta, I read an article the other day talking about how, depending on who winds up being in control of Metaverse, you could literally be walking down the street and maybe somebody has a filter on that identifies Republican from Democrat. That was nerve-wracking to me, right? In a little bit, in a way, because I don't necessarily want everybody knowing whether or not I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, right?
I think that this is, again, this sort of falls into that kind of big trend, whether it's, privacy or antitrust. So, I mean, let's be honest, you had to change your name from Facebook to Meta, because if you want to be the company that's controlling data, in the next generation of the internet, you think anybody's going to trust Facebook in doing that? No chance. So like they obviously, they're banking on kind of this little bait and switch to say like, let's change the name and try to convince everybody that we're going to fool them. They'll say, no, this is about where the market's going. I'm like, not really. I mean, because a big part of the market, big part of that metaverse is about data. And so like, I don't think that it can be, a Facebook or, even a Microsoft or these individual companies. The weak part of all these companies is really sort of is their unwillingness to sort of acknowledge that it's consumers data, and that they should own it, not Facebook, not Microsoft, not Google. And so like they're trying to figure out how to do Web3 or that metaverse without sort of acknowledging that, the data should be controlled of the consumer. I think that's a square peg in a round hole. I just don't think that they're going to win there. Consumers, the awareness of consumers specifically around their data, what they can do with it, and the accessibility around it it's just growing. And, ultimately, like everybody else, I'm a capitalist. I don't believe in monopolies. I think they're like black holes. They exist for a finite period of time until, some young upstart comes up with better technology, or a new protocol emerges to actually unseat them. And I think that's what's going to happen. You don't need antitrust to break up Google and Facebook. The market will break up Google and Facebook on their own because they're too big, they're too slow, and the protocol is changing, which will actually kind of come back to bite them in the ass. So
wasn't there a company called MySpace?
Yeah.
That was the first social media giant. I think that was pretty much. I think they were the player, right? I mean, and then along came a little startup and kind of wiped them out. I don't think they even exist anymore, right?
Yeah, there's a great TED talk from Bill Gross that everybody should watch, just about kind of what he's got. Some absurd number of companies he's started, like I want to say like 80 companies. Totally impressive. But he did a great TED talk on kind of like what makes the company sort of successful. And his big thing was, it's not just kind of the idea or the team. A lot of it's timing. So timing of Airbnb around kind of the Obama election, etc., was just about right for it to inflect. The same for like Facebook and others. The timing for some of these other platforms.
Peloton. We just talked about Peloton this morning, right? The timing on that one was perfect. Pandemic. I mean, everybody's buying a damn Peloton because they can't go to the gym.
Yeah.
But now that the thing is opening back up, the country's opening back up, guess what? The Peloton's pretty much hanging laundry's hanging off the Peloton now, and it's collecting dust, and those are probably going to get sold. And Peloton, but the Peloton did well for a long period there,
sure.
Right? It was timing.
And I think, just kind of back to some of the stuff that we're doing, I do think sort of if you acknowledge that, consumers should be involved in kind of their data and that they should have optionality. Like, we don't want to tell you what to do with your data. I think that was kind of the limitation of our original model, which was, if you don't want to sell data, then what's the utility of Reklaim to you? Well, it's kind of zero. But what we have now is sort of like, we've flanked that compensation tier with this privacy tier that we're introducing. The privacy tier is for people that actually don't want to sell data. You can get access to a Reklaim VPN, you can get password data breach protection, so on and so forth. That's a subscription. That's a new revenue model for us. It's a subscription. It's $10 a month. But again, it flanks that compensation tier. So remember, like right back to the beginning, it was access creates optionality. At one extreme, it's compensation. At the other extreme, it's privacy. We have products to satisfy.
So I can do either. I mean, I can do either or. I mean, I can do both, right? I can do both if I want. Can I do both?
You can. That's that pragmatist. And I think that's the essential piece, which is we don't care which one you do. We don't, because like, hey, if you want to sell data, we work on a rev share, right? So we bring all those brands to you. They buy your data. You make $1, we make $1, rinse and repeat. Great. The more data we sell, the more data we bring to the table, the more buyers we bring to the table, the more money you're going to make, which inherently makes the product more sticky. That's great for half the audience. But the other half's like, I don't want to sell data. I'm like, that's cool. You can come here. You can sign up to, our privacy tier. It's $100 a year, $10 a month. It's a SaaS-based kind of revenue model for us, which is great. But it gives you all of these tools to actually protect your data. And what I think is important about that is, remember, stage one, we reclaimed your data. But whenever you open a browser or open an application, data is going back out into the market. So you're in this vicious cycle of, I'm reclaiming data, but I keep putting data back in the market. How do you shrink that footprint? So some of these tools that we're starting to introduce in the product, with the Reklaim VPN is a good example. You run the Reklaim VPN, you're putting less net new data into the market, right?
Okay, the VPN. So that's where your internet is not identifiable, right? It kind of like spreads it out through.
Exactly. Okay. So companies that are actually using your browsing history or using your location history, it obfuscates that a little bit. So it makes it harder for those individuals to get that data. Similarly, again, and we know that 2021 was the biggest year of data breaches. I think 2022 will be even bigger. So like, you have to have tools to alert you when your data has been breached and what data is there, and show them the data that's there. That's also part of the privacy package, where we'll show you if you've been hacked. We'll show you the data, that's what site it came from, what data has been hacked, and allow you.
So I've noticed recently that I've had, like, I can't remember. I've noticed recently that, like, if I have passwords out there, I get a notification saying, well, 3 of your passwords have been breached, right?
Yeah.
That's relatively new, I think.
Yep, exactly. And I think that, that's just hygiene, right? So it's about kind of knowing where your data is. But again, I think this is part of the limitation of how the data market was built. The data market was built on you giving your data to a third party, Equifax, Facebook, LinkedIn, whomever.
I was part of that Equifax breach.
Yeah. And I think, like, if you think about the challenges in the market today, from compliance, consent, privacy, fidelity, security, these are all byproducts of the disintermediation of the consumer from their data. If you reverse that and keep the data with the consumer and force those companies to come and get it from the individual versus the consumers giving it to those Equifaxes, you solve all those problems: security, ransomware, fidelity, fraud, privacy, consent. All of the challenges that we have in the market today are a byproduct of the way in which the data has been structured. Our whole philosophy is, no, reverse it. Put the data back at the consumer, let them protect them, let them kind of option off of it, let them make their rules around it, and all of those ancillary problems will go away.
It makes 100% sense to me. So I know that you've done some fairly big, last time we spoke, I think you had some pretty big Well, was it certifications, or there's some big companies that you partnered with, right? That you had to you had to jump through a lot of hoops. It's not like anybody could just go partner with these guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we sell to three different verticals. We sell to platforms, we sell to data companies, and we sell to brands. And what I tell everybody is, we're a 30-person company, but we're selling data to Microsoft, Hasbro, BP. These are Fortune 500 brands that are choosing to work with us versus any other data company. Similarly, on the data side of the equation, we've sold data to Nielsen, which is the biggest research firm from a TV analytics perspective. Like, that's not a trivial thing to just get a deal with Nielsen. And then, and the last part is platforms. So, this is often missed, amongst the market, but, the big platforms are basically big distribution hubs, no different than a Costco or a Walmart. They have thousands of individual clients. That's where the Fortune 500 buy their data. We've done integrations into Snowflake. We've done integrations into LiveRamp. We've done integrations into, T-Mobile. We've done integrations into Xandr, Viant. These are all publicly traded companies. Our data sits there and is available to the thousands of companies that are actually inside of each of those platforms. So it's no different than if we were selling coffee. The more distribution you have, the more ability you actually have to drive revenue. So, I've been pounding the table on this for quite some time. The idea there has been, hey, you got to have scale of data, you have to have distribution, and you have to have uniqueness. If you only have two out of the three, you're running like you're a three-legged dog, and you're going to trail the pack. That's just the reality. So if you have those three, you have unlimited scale from a revenue perspective. And like, you can see it, our revenue year over year is up 1,500%. Our quarter over quarter revenue is up 70%. This machine is starting to track now because we've built all this architecture. And then you add in the fact that we've got this big trend behind us regarding all the things that we just talked about. We think that this is, a massive, massive, trend, and a massive, massive story that, we can capitalize on.
And I think that's what kind of brings us here, right? Is the fact that, I think the retail investor they don't recognize, and part of that is Wall Street. Wall Street has trained the retail investor not to be looking at low price stocks. Don't be trading OTC stocks because, well, they're cheap for a reason. They're bad companies. But reality is, Microsoft at one time was a $2 stock. Apple at one time was a $3 stock. And, they don't all start as rock stars. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure none of them did, right? They start out as small companies. And if you can recognize the trends early, if you can identify the companies that are leading a disruption in the marketplace, then you could do extremely well. Wall Street doesn't necessarily want, retail investors playing down there because they need somebody to buy the overpriced, high price stuff that they've been holding on to from lower prices, right? So 100%. They really don't want retail doing the homework and educating themselves. And let's face it, you're not going to get on CNBC. Well, you might for 10 seconds, right? I mean, you're going to have a 10-second clip. You're not going to be able to tell the entire story. So, and then there's the paid for promotion guys, which I'm sorry, but whenever I know it's a paid for promotion, there's this little thing in the back of my head that says, well, wait a minute. Are they talking about this company because they really like the company, or are they talking about them because it's a paid for promotion? They got paid a check, right? Yeah. But those are the only paths that the small company has, right? It's like either you're paying for promotion, or maybe you get a 10-second clip. That's about it. That's as much coverage as you're going to get, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what we try to educate everybody on is like, look, this stock is super tight. Is that, there's 70 million shares. I'm the biggest shareholder. I've got more money in this stock than anybody else. So I stand to make more, but lose more than anybody else. I'm not the CEO that owns 1% of the stock, so on and so forth. So like, it's super tight. So it's not going to take a lot for this stock to move. But what I tell everybody is, do you believe in this trend? Do you believe in this thesis? Forget about Reklaim for a second. Just look at the larger trend. Is that, look around you. Is data changing? Is privacy changing? Is antitrust inflecting? Like, is Web3 coming? Like, are all these things, are these things that you believe in? Because if you believe in that as a theme, then the question becomes, okay, good. Now go to the public market or private market and find the companies that are best at that. And I tell them, I'm like, if you believe in data and you believe the changes that are going to happen in data, I encourage you to go find a company on the public market, big cap, small cap, micro cap, Germany, Canada, Australia, wherever. You're not going to find anybody further ahead than us. I just don't think you are. I'm like, if you can, you should buy that company. You believe in that trend. But if you believe in this trend, do your homework and like show me someone that has more scale, more distribution, growing reoccurring revenue, been in the market for 20 years, done integrations into Fortune 500 companies, is qualified against these brands. I'm like, show us. And the good thing about this is that it's a pretty easy way to get in here. There's nobody sitting at the bottom of this stock with 1 cent paper looking to blow it up. It's not going to happen. It's too tight. So, this is the stock for people that actually kind of believe in what the longer term trend is. And, you'll wake up in a year from now and the cookie will be gone, half the internet is going to be under pressure, and then you're going to say like, look, that's what we believe. That's what we thought the market was going.
So here's the way I view things. Maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but if you take a look at the Reklaim product, so you go to the Reklaim site, you download the Reklaim to your phone, right? I just was thinking, can I do it on my computer? Does it have to be on the phone? Can I do it on the desktop too?
You can do it on the web as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So download the app, right? And then if I like what I see there, because I think it'll be an eye-opening experience for a lot of people, because I've done it, right? I think it'll be a eye-opening experience as to how much information you can actually pull off of that thing or look at. And I think it's only going to get better, right? So, sure. So you download the app and you say, God, yeah, I get this. This makes a lot of sense to me. And whether it's, I'm the guy that wants to sell the data and I'm the guy that wants to protect my data, it doesn't really matter. It's because it's working either way and it's all in one place, right? And then you go, wait a minute, I do like the product. How consumer is so powerful. Walmart did not become Walmart because Walmart built a store and nobody went to it. Walmart was successful because they built the store and consumers went, right? So we could bitch and complain about the fact, we put a bunch of mom and pop shops out of business, but who did that? It wasn't Walmart, it was the consumer that did that, right? They started going to Walmart. So the consumer has a lot of power. And if instead of going and buying $1,000 pair of Nike shoes that cost, I don't know, $40 to make, maybe what you do is you find a company that you believe in, that you think maybe is going in this direction of the future, and you take that $1,000 and you put it into a 20-cent stock, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And what I always tell everybody is that, some people go in and buy these, you can go buy a junior miner that's, mining uranium in Saskatchewan. Like, I don't think you really understand the nuances of what that is. Or, you can literally hold this product in your hand, watch it evolve day over day, have instant communication with the people that are building the product. You can be a consumer and an investor at the same time. I do think, what we've always said is that, we look at companies like a Robinhood and how they've tried to democratize trading for the everyday investor. We're trying to do a similar thing. We're trying to democratize data for the individual consumer. We're going to take this very sort of cumbersome, dreary topic and make it sort of a little bit more kind of consumer friendly and give you an interface and an ecosystem from which you can kind of work with it. Because we know most people are they're sort of intimidated by data. And so, we're somewhere between, we're like the love child of like Kredit Karma and Robinhood together, which is like, I think that's what we kind of look like. But what I tell everybody all the time is that you want to see how the product's going to evolve, get in the product. We ship every 2 weeks new releases, and every 2 weeks the product gets better and better.
There's the thing right there, right? So, and I'm just going to use this as an example. You've got Reddit, who proved that there is strength in numbers. They put a $1.5 billion fund out of business, and a bunch of retail people got rich in about 2 weeks' time. And that was an amazing thing for me, because it shows the strength that retail investors can have when they pull together, right? However, they missed the mark. Now they're pulling together to save a company like AMC, which is a dying business. It was a shitty business pre-COVID. It's a shittier business post-COVID. They have so much debt, so many shares. The Chinese company that owned 51% of them doesn't own any shares anymore. The CEO has been selling shares through this whole time. I tried to get an interview with the CEO prior to COVID. Never going to happen. But then he's doing an interview with the Reddit guys streaming. Why? Because they were saving his freaking company, and they were giving him a golden parachute the size of, a huge golden parachute. And it upsets me, because AMC is going to die no matter what. It's going to shrink, at least. I can get movies delivered to my home the same time they get delivered to the theater. And I could have steak and lobster here and a nice bottle of wine and invite my friends over, and it'd still be cheaper than going to the theater and buying popcorn and candy, right? So I think it's capital intensive. It's a problem business, where this business is, I think, good for the consumer, right? And all you have to do is talk to your circle of influence. I mean, look at how this works. Look at how my brain works here, right? You download the app, you try it out, you like it, you recognize that this is something that is probably going to take hold. More people need to know about it. So what do? You tell your friends, and you tell them to download the app, right? And they get to use it. And then what happens? You become stronger. And if you bought the stock at the same time,
well, I mean, again,
I'm just saying,
stock's a 20 to 30 cent stock. You make more out of the paycheck weekly in Reklaim than a share of the stock costs. So just put that in perspective. You could get, if you sign up for the most basic level, you're going to get a quarter a week just for basically passively participating. You could buy a share every week of this company by doing that. And if you shared more, you're going to obviously make more money. So like, to me, it makes a ton of sense. Which is
to me, this is a whole circular thing, right? I mean, you're helping a company that is probably going to achieve the success regardless. You're just going to help them do it faster. And as a shareholder, you are part owner in that mission. Now, I would say this though.
But I think that's the important part. Like, okay, so, you can own part of that uranium mine if you want, but I'm like, this is, to me, I mean, not to get kind of, overly sort of rah on this, but I'm like, look, to me, there's a lot, like when you look at kind of revolutions historically, revolutions are usually not kind of created by a great individual. It's usually due to a common individual or a group of common individuals looking at behavior that has been going on for a long time and drawing a line in the sand and saying no more. And then they rally around that, whether that was Arab Spring, BLM, Me Too, so on and so forth. This wasn't new behavior. This was legacy behavior. That's happening in data. And it's starting to get louder and louder. People are starting to get wise to what's happening. And that consumer revolution around data is coming. And so what I tell people all the time is like, look, you don't have to believe in Reklaim, but if you don't, that you don't believe that you should be in control of your own data. And I've yet to meet a consumer that says that they don't think that they should be involved. I haven't met one. So I'm like, okay, so if you want to change things, then you got to get involved. And if you want to get involved in Reklaim, because every consumer in Reklaim is kind of one net new person kind of committing to this change of how data is actually being used.
All right, so let me play the skeptic for a second. But wait a minute, if I'm giving you all of my access to all of my data, what makes you any different than Facebook or anybody else?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, our plan is to kind of take that data longer term and kind of put it on the chain. So what people that are new to the story don't realize is that the very, very first iteration of this product, which I probably did like 4+ years ago, we wrote a patent on it and everything. Encrypted data stored on the handset, written on the blockchain. So while everybody today is pouring champagne on themselves about the blockchain, we were doing that like 4 or 5 years ago. Like we did it. And there's limitations around that. The limitations are you have to educate people on the blockchain, so on and so forth. But I believe data, consumer privacy, and blockchain are on a collision course. But where I think the mistakes are, one, traditional companies are going to have a very tough time pivoting. And traditional blockchain companies are basically thinking about, you know, you just got to do this hard pivot to the blockchain. It doesn't work like that. You know, it's going to take time for systems, et cetera, to change. So what we did is we made a decision to actually build the scale to eventually then pick it up and move it and drop it on the blockchain. But absolutely, I think the point is that we will be like Uber. We're going to be the company that doesn't own a vehicle. You know, Uber doesn't own any cars. We're going to be the company, Reklaim, that doesn't own any data. Why? Because you own the data. You have control of it. It's under your, you know, that's the direction that we're going in. And I don't care what anybody says. Oracle and their $600 billion valuation on NASDAQ isn't going to jump the chasm to get over there and all of a sudden give all this ownership to the consumers around their data. They'd go from 600 billion to zero overnight. And is Facebook 2.5 billion people in it just all of a sudden going to start giving consumers their data? Zero chance. Zero. No chance. So like for us, it's you got to build a third pillar here to kind of, to really sort of be the antithesis of kind of those social networks or those walled gardens. And then once you build that third pillar, hey, yeah, can you increasingly kind of tokenize that identity, give that consumer their NFT, put it on the blockchain, and then increasingly get out of the way. I can tell you, I have no interest in owning or housing anybody's data. I don't want to do that. That runs completely contrary to our whole philosophy is your data is yours, we're giving it to you, and we're getting out of the way. That's the idea. Okay.
So all they have to do is go to, they go to what? www.reklaim.com and
yeah, go to reclaimyours.com. That's the way to get into the product. I mean, you can get it Reklaim with a K. You can get it out of iOS or the Google Play Store. But if you want to get it online, go to reclaimyours.com. Play around with the product, and like the symbol is MYIDF trades on the QB in the US. It also trades in Canada on the venture.
No, actually, we're gonna talk about the chart here in 1 second. So let me pull that up. There we go. MYIDF is the symbol. And we're looking at what, let's see. So when did you guys actually, so the spike back in September of 2020? What was this big spike for? Do you know?
2020?
Yeah.
I mean, that's when kind of the company got sort of split out on its own. So like, remember, Freckle was kind of the parent company.
Okay.
Up to then, and then we sold Freckle to focus primarily on MyID. So like we kept the same public shell, but we ran a different company inside of it.
Okay, and then there was a split 1 for 5.
That was a housekeeping item primarily because we did when we brought the original business Freckle public, we took over a shell, which today in the US, you'll call it a SPAC, but it was an RTO or reverse takeover. We had too many shares. So like we wanted to increasingly move the visibility of this to the US, and we got lots of people telling us like, you have too many shares. So we collapsed the share structure, we cleaned up the house and just made it really tight. So now like there's 70 million shares, there's no debt, there's a
oh, wait, back up. There's what?
Zero debt.
zero debt. What's the killer of companies? Debt.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd
All
say
right.
at the time, like, there's 70 million shares. I'm the single largest shareholder. There's 50% inside ownership. There's no debt. There's like $7 million. There's some warrants out there that are at $1.05. The stock's at 30 cents. And there's some options, but those are all for employees. So like we've seen even over the last quarter, like, the stock is so tight that, it's hard for people to get kind of a bigger block of stock. So you got to chip away at it. If you want to build a position, you kind of got to get on the board.
Right. So
I own more stock than anybody else. I say that all the time.
Look, that's what makes it challenging on OTC stocks. And I will say this, that if, if you are trying to build size into a position like this, you have to recognize that this is a long-term play. This is not a stock because there's not enough volume in the name to be able to flip it quickly. I mean, you could build a great big position, and then when you go to try to sell it, even if the stock takes off, there may not be any buyers there, right? So that's just the reality of it. Yep. However, if you believe in the story and that this is just the beginning, and from a technical standpoint, I will just tell you that, so think about what's happening in the markets right now. We've got these big volatile swings. What you're not seeing here, I'm on the weekly time frame. Let me go to the daily. Now, this is what makes a chart not look pretty, right? And this is just because it's thinly traded. There are days where it doesn't trade any shares, which creates those little gaps, right? Yeah. By going to the weekly time frame, that gives us a much clearer picture of what the stock is doing over a weekly time frame. And it's holding this area as potential support, right? I mean, this what do you want to call it? 18 to 17 cents seems to be holding as support. And it's actually kind of coiling up, right, to this trend line right here. You can see where it's starting to coil up right here. At some point, I think there's going to be an inflection. You're either going to break to the upside or you're going to break to the downside, right? Downside wouldn't necessarily be a great thing, but if I'm to look at it and say, okay, well, where's my downside risk? The next area of potential support is about 9 cents. Okay. If it breaks to the upside, where is the real big area of resistance? That's, kind of how I define my areas of, so I don't know, 40 cents is about, so right there, that's kind of a, what do I want to call that? I want to call that, the risk reward is not substantial there. I mean, it's pretty break even, but if I then go to the next area of potential resistance, somewhere around 60 cents, right now, my risk reward is getting much better. So, yeah. And the thing is, if you are following the story and you become a consumer of the product and you're out there telling your friends about the product and more people use it, then that should equate to more revenues for you, which then, right, is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, look, the market's trading sideways right now. We talked about that before we started. I think that this is sort of the floor of where it's at. I think when the market starts to digest kind of the privacy tier fully and the introduction of kind of this SaaS-based revenue line that's going to go on top of the pre-existing revenue line that is already growing exponentially, I think the question always becomes like, well, what are the catalysts to kind of move this up? Well, introducing a new revenue line, continued top line growth, like continued sort of expansion. I think the product every couple of weeks is getting better and better and better. We continue to bring in more and more clients. The revenue keeps going up. So, I think it's up. I think it's upwards from here. And again, I just think that because, there's not a big float out there, we've seen it make those kind of bigger jumps relatively quickly. Our plan is to try to figure out, obviously we want more eyes on the stock for sure. We've been sort of heads down building the product. we need to increase the visibility of the brand a little bit. That's definitely one of the things that we have to do. But I think the combination of, the continued growth on, the revenue side, the larger privacy / data trend, and then, the introduction of the privacy tier, these are all good things for us in the immediate term as it relates to the stock.
How are you sitting on cash, Neil? I mean, are you going to have to do any kind of a cap raise in the near future that maybe that's what people would be concerned about if they look at the burn and
yeah, I mean, look, we're a growth company. I mean, we're always going to be raising capital. I mean, we have enough capital to kind of continue to do what we're doing. But yeah, we'll do a capital raise at some point. The question is going to be, we definitely don't want to do one at this price. That's for sure. So, I mean, I think, we've got enough cash for sure, but like, let's not lose sight of the fact that we're a growth company, and if I have line of sight on, making this company, a 10x opportunity, like we're going for it. So,
and that could be through an acquisition or something of that nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we have an acquisition list of over 6,000 companies. So, I think for us, one of the big things that people don't understand is that, there's over 6,000 data brokers in California alone. These are companies, you won't be able to name one of them, that actually collect your data and sell your data and sell it to as many people for as much money as possible. They're aggregating data. The pressure is on these companies in the future, because the reality is that how do they remain compliant, in the future state? And so, just using round numbers, if you're a data broker with $1 million, you might want to come into Reklaim because, in doing so, you can keep your clients, you can bring the revenue to Reklaim, but you can then all of a sudden your data can get compliant, because what we will do with that data is we'll bind it to the consumer. So, I think that we're focused sort of on twofold. One is, we think the revenue is going to continue to compound exponentially, organically, for sure. And we're growing that sales team. But, we're trying to be a little bit opportunistic in thinking about, okay, well, we think there's going to be a lot of companies that are going to be under pressure over the next 12 months. And if they don't have a UX or a consumer facing, front end, they might want to partner up with Reklaim. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. What about future plans to potentially uplist to a senior exchange?
We're going to do that this year, for sure.
Okay.
We're going to do that this year for sure. And, I think that aligns with kind of that, capital M&A strategy. So, if we go to NASDAQ, you got to raise 15 million bucks, right? What are you going to do with the 15 million bucks? Well, create more general market awareness around the Reklaim brand, be opportunistic around M&A, double the size of the sales team, potentially expand a little bit. So, that's growth capital. So,
but so you come across to me as a pretty sharp guy, Neil, just so you know. And I'm thinking, you're probably not going to want to just uplist to the NASDAQ, just to uplist to the NASDAQ, right? I mean, you want to have everything aligned. Sales are hockey sticking, right? Revenue's growing. You said you're a growth company. You want to be demonstrating that. When you go to the NASDAQ, you want to have all cylinders firing, right?
For sure. So we think, I mean, again, like it's easy to say, oh yeah, we're firing on all cylinders. I mean, we're like every company. We've got we've got a few fleas like anybody else. But, I would say, to me, what we really wanted was, and this kind of aligns sort of even with the branding component, the product, the promise, and the brand need to be vertically aligned. Because if you can vertically align those three, you get velocity in your organization, right? So if your product is off of the brand and the mission, then you're going to kind of stub your toe. But if you can get these three things aligned, and then those components around sales, revenue, momentum, those are growing, that's when you're in a better position. So, I mean, I don't have a date, like we're going to the NASDAQ on Feb 1, or we're going to the NASDAQ on June 1. But like, look, to me, if you look at where's the biggest data companies in the world, they're on the NASDAQ. Where do all those big data companies reside? California. California is the most onerous privacy state in the US. Who's the natural hedge against those California-based data companies? Us. So that's how we see it, is that one, like, look, I'm competitive. I want to get in the arena. So like, I want in, and I want to go against those people, and I want to go against those companies, because I think that, we have a different strategy, and we have a better, we have a better play. But I also think that as the market continues to sort of think about, the future state of data, they're going to be looking at the companies. So it's no different. Like, we talked about Peloton, but like, people played the reopening trade. Well, who's the hedge against the data trade or the antitrust trade or kind of like the China trade? Like, we think it's us. And so, for us, having that visibility and awareness is important. And I also think that every time another state implements a privacy law, every time another company gets hacked, anytime there's another sort of data scandal or an antitrust sort of sentiment floating around, that's good for us. It's all good for us. So that's really kind of where we see it, is that we just think with changes to Google, Apple, privacy, all these trends, that the market is going to be looking for the company that kind of represents sort of the future state of where data is going. 320 million people, 87% of the North American population can find data in this ecosystem. We've tried to build a consumer brand. We want to increase that awareness around the consumer brand. Just think that lines up. Now, again, it doesn't mean that like we're going to NASDAQ tomorrow, but we're going there. Like, that's happening for sure. I'm not
unless somebody gobbles you up.
Yeah, for sure. And like, look, let's not be like, there's a history of that happening to my previous companies, right? So, what we're building is we're good at commercializing nascent technology and seeing where things are going. Those companies that are going to have problems in the future are going to be looking for solutions to solve that problem. We built this company to solve a problem in my last company. And in building it, we realized this isn't a problem for quote unquote Freckle. This is a problem for any company operating in data. So, are you an acquisition target to, I don't know, an Experian, a Salesforce, an Oracle, LiveRamp, an Apple, a Samsung? Maybe. That's not how we build the company. I don't believe that's what you should do. My philosophy on building companies has always been, you put your head down, you do the work, you build the best company that you can in your space, because no one's interested in the number 3 player. Everyone's interested in like, who's the best company in the space? And if you're that company, you've got options. But if you're the 5th best company in that space, you don't have a lot of options. So it's like, don't try to build your company to get acquired. Try to build your company to be the best in its vertical. And if you do, you've got options. And if you don't, then you should kind of continue to focus on your business. So.
Plus, I think selling too early is always a mistake, right? I mean, selling it now would be kind of foolish, because you haven't proven it yet, right? You've got to get to that. You got to get to that inflection point, I think, right?
It's too early right now for sure. And I think like, it's come a long way, but there's so much still to do. We'll see. I mean, I think that's the great thing about the structure of the company, is that anybody that wants to buy this company's got to come to me. They got to ask me, because like I own the most amount of it. And the reality is that, I'm not a first-time entrepreneur that's going to get like doe-eyed because somebody's, putting a check in front of them. I've been there, done that. So like this is something where we're building this company because we think it can make a material impact on the planet. And like, not to be cliche, but if you want to try to put a dent in the universe, try changing data for 7 billion people on the planet. That's ambitious. That's exciting to me. That's what gets my juice going, is like, we can do something really, really big here, really big. The sale part is like, okay, yeah, that's part of it. I'm a capitalist for sure. But I'm like, what motivates me is seeing the idea that was originally in your brain manifest into a product, manifest onto the street, manifest.
That's protecting and enriching people.
Yes. Just like seeing that kind of go, I mean, like more and more people are kind of rallying around this. I mean, we've talked about this incessantly, but like, I just think that when you fast forward 2 years from now, there's no situation that the world of data is going to resemble the world of data today. There's just no chance. And so, who are the companies that are trying to set themselves up, to take advantage of that? And I think the people that are kind of investing in the business now kind of know that things are changing. And they're, obviously they're taking a bet on us, but, I put my money where my mouth is. So, I think that should give people some confidence that we're not screwing around over here.
No, listen, I love these kinds of stories, right? I love these kinds of stories. I feel your passion. I don't know if anybody else that's watching this is going to feel your passion, but I'm pretty confident that they will. And I think they're going to recognize you're a pretty smart guy. So, with that being said, 2 years from now, hopefully you and I are still in communication. Hopefully I'm still alive. And we can talk about how things changed in 2 years' time, right? Because I think it's going to be a pretty fascinating conversation.
Yeah, we can talk even at the end of this year. I mean, things are moving so fast, but yeah, we'll obviously be in touch for sure. I won't be like you won't ever have a problem getting an interview with me, Tim. Don't worry about that.
All right, listen, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm not gonna, I am not a financial advisor, so I'm not telling anybody to buy the stock. I think what you need to do is you need to download the app, you need to check it out, you need to do your own due diligence, and then you need to ask yourself, is this company worth 20 cents a share? And what's my upside potential? I think it's probably fairly decent. I mean, your downside, look, nothing's guaranteed. Could it go to zero? Sure. Do I think that's going to happen? I think that's unlikely. So, do your own due diligence, but MYIDF is the symbol. You're going to change that? Is that ever going to change to like RKLM?
Well, it changed. So I didn't want to change the symbol when we sold off the parent company because that was going to create more confusion. I mean, I'd like to get rid of the F component because that basically stands for foreign, right?
Right.
So like my ID, that's okay. The my IDF drives me a bit crazy, but I think we kind of deal with that on the potential uplist, right?
Right.
I'm cool with the my ID. I actually like that as a symbol. I don't love the my IDF. That drives me a bit bonkers, but getting punished for being originally from Canada. And that's another thing is we want this increasingly to be I want this to be a US stock. Again, it has its origin in a Canadian company, but this is not a Canadian story. This is a US story. We want it on a US big board.
It's a global story is what it is.
But we want
a global story.
We wanted the only place that you can buy it is in the US. That's what
we
want. That's what I want. I don't want to be buying it on these sort of smaller, international. I don't care about that. I want to get on the board, funnel all the volume kind of into one spot. This is the place. That's it.
Neil, I really appreciate you taking the time and doing the interview. You guys have an investor relations newsletter. Can people go to your site, sign up for?
They sure can. Yep. It's on reclaimyours.com, but it's the actual URL is investors at reclaimyours.com. So you can go there and get any information that you want as well.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording on this and hold on 1 second just so I can wrap up with you. Thanks for tuning in to Alpha Wolf Trading CEO interview with Neil Sweeney from Reklaim, ticker symbol MYID as in dog, F as in Frank. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, why not give us a follow? Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Trading wishes you the very best of success.